Azerbaijan has openly defied the Russian pseudo-state. The incident with the Azerbaijani passenger plane shot down over Chechnya could not be hushed up. Baku is demanding justice and revenge.
We can say with absolute clarity and certainty that the plane was shot down by Russia. This is a fact, and no one can deny it.
Let us recall that the Russian unparalleled air defense operators mistook a 30-meter-long Embraer weighing 20 tons for a Ukrainian Boba drone. Apparently, they had some methyl alcohol beforehand and went blind. But what outraged the Azerbaijanis was not even the fact of the bungled crime itself, but the Kremlin's blatant lies and its attempt to cover for the perpetrators. They started throwing out insane theories, just like with the Malaysian Boeing. Moreover, there is indirect evidence that Moscow actually wanted to eliminate the witnesses, which is why they sent the damaged plane to fly over the Caspian Sea.
They already understood that they had not attacked a military target or a drone, but had attacked a passenger plane. And they realized that most likely there would be a disaster. People would die, and the blame would obviously fall on the Russian side. And to send the plane over the sea to another country, well, maybe they were hoping that the plane wouldn't make it and that something would happen to it over the sea, and then they could somehow cover up what had happened.
Then on the news, they would have said that the plane was shot down by genetically modified Ukrainian geese. But the airliner made it to Kazakhstan, and the survivors told everyone that Russia is a terrorist state.
The air defense system was activated. They were firing missiles. I don't know, maybe they were chasing after Ukrainian drones. What was that? Well, in such cases, the airspace is supposed to be closed. The plane is supposed to circle above the airport, but the airspace wasn't closed. And then, even after it was damaged, they didn't allow it to land. What is that supposed to mean? The state should take responsibility and promise to investigate everything that happened, punish those responsible, and so on. But today we see that the highest Russian authorities prefer to remain silent.
Even after irrefutable evidence, Moscow is not going to acknowledge any responsibility or admit guilt, hand over the criminals, or even offer a proper apology in any way. The Kremlin is behaving like a drunken thug who drove into a bus stop full of people.
The Russian side should apologize to Azerbaijan. Secondly, it must admit its guilt.
But Moscow continued to play it cool, and may have even rewarded the air defense unit that shot down the plane. Putin always does this with war criminals. Just the other day, Pina appointed, Nursultan Musagaliev, who was involved in the killings of civilians in Baku, as Deputy Minister of Regional and Information Policy of the Orenburg region.
The pride of the village, hero of Russia, Nursultan Musagaliev, is now defending the country from neo-Nazi scum. Nursultan came to Sudbadorovka with his parents from a neighboring village, which unfortunately no longer exists on the map of Orenburg region.
In Pashtoon Baku, it was made clear that Russia is now far from a friendly state. The Azerbaijani Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent a note to Russia demanding that the activities of the Russian house in the capital be stopped.
We regret this in connections.
We believe that this is a misunderstanding that can be resolved through bilateral contacts. Of course, we will raise this issue with our colleagues at various levels. If there are high-level contacts, then most likely we do not rule out that this issue may be brought up in the dialogue between the two heads of state.
The official reason is the lack of legal registration. But everyone understands why the Russian house in Baku really shuttered its windows. Of course, Z-patriots and imperialists exploded like jars of pickles.
This is a requirement of the Azerbaijani authorities. At the same time, I demand that our government expel all Azerbaijanis who are not Russian citizens from the territory beyond the borders of our homeland. That's one.
The head of Rosotrudnichestvo, Yevgeny Primakov, stated that Baku's reaction is very emotional. I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because Russia killed dozens of Azerbaijani citizens, tried to eliminate witnesses, and the top leadership is playing dumb and lying like a fifth grader caught in the bathroom with a bag of glue. Saying that this provokes emotions is putting it mildly.
If any country bordering us becomes a staging ground for an attack against us, I am absolutely certain, I am convinced that there will be a response.
In recent months, relations between Azerbaijan and Russia have noticeably deteriorated. They weren't great to begin with, since Moscow pretended to support Armenia in the Karabakh conflict. But now, the Russians in Baku will definitely hear the phrase suitcase, train station, nowheresville.
We also have a very big problem in the south. Namely, I'm trying to be polite, God have mercy, and restrain my words. But I have no other word for it than insane black people. The Azeris have suddenly become extremely bold and have made demands of Russia.
Azerbaijan is demonstrating its distancing from Russia, strengthening its ties with Turkey, and what especially irritates the Kremlin bugs, continuing to provide humanitarian aid to Ukraine. On February 5th, 2025, the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, personally signed an order to allocate $1 million for the purchase and delivery of domestically produced electrical equipment as humanitarian aid to Ukraine. The president signed it personally. This is not just humanitarian aid, it is a political gesture. Upbeat music. The closure of the Russian house in Baku is a black mark for the Russian pirate. The end of expansion. Because everyone knows perfectly well what the Russian house is. It is a stronghold of the security services, which operate with a single goal: to undermine the statehood of the countries where this house is located. Let me remind you, there was such a Russian house in Crimea as well. Russia invests hundreds of millions into these public houses to aggressively push Russian narratives and carry out subversive activities.
60% of the population of Riga are Russian speakers. This is our city.
If there is still a Russian house in your country, you are in danger. This bedbug-infested place needs to be urgently demolished and shipped off beyond the Golden Ring. It has become customary that Russians in different countries do nothing but prepare for a Russian army invasion, harbor intense hatred for the local population, and beg Putin to send in troops. In Latvia, for example, there are as many of these nutcrackers as there are frogs in a swamp.
Here, as I call it, we have the most ethnic city in the EU. Our deputy mayor is from a party that openly supported the invasion.
He says things like, Putin is great, that's how it should be.
The scariest thing is that Russian Nazis even managed to infiltrate the government bodies of the countries they live in. A vivid example: Putinist, rashist, imperialist, Stalinist, Z supporter, and just a typical Vatnik ghoul, Andrei Mamikin.
Russia will definitely achieve victory in this global war. It's not just about territory, it's about spiritual values. It's about our Russian world. And forgive me, but even for our Latvia, because that's Russian land too.
This individual was a member of the European Parliament from Latvia.
Andrei Mamikin has joined us in the studio. He's our former colleague and now a politician, even on a European scale. Good morning, Andrei.
Good morning. I had two personal moments that brought a lump to my throat and tears to my eyes. The first was August 25th of last year, when, on the very last day, the stele of the main monument to the heroes of the Great Patriotic War in Riga, in Pardagava, in Zadvin, collapsed. And the second, for me, personally, was the illegal separation of the Latvian Orthodox Church from the canonical territory of the Russian Orthodox Church.
Fortunately, the story of this peasant-footed Stirlitz has come to an end. In Latvia, criminal proceedings have been initiated against him for glorifying and justifying Russian war crimes committed in Ukraine.
At this very moment, as we stand in the studio, in these very seconds, Russia is truly carrying out a great and sacred mission in Ukraine.
Naturally, this Cipollino ran off to the swamp. That's exactly where he belongs. At least he's no longer in Latvia or the European Parliament.
I was given it a couple of times, and I started to respect everyone. Well, because if you keep going, your health will just run out.
But there are still plenty of such mankurts. In Moldova, one of them even managed to serve as president. Do you remember Dodon, that fan of Kulibiaka, and Putin?
During his visit to Moscow, President Igor Dodon met with Patriarch Kirill. The head of state will take part in an informal meeting of CIS country leaders and will also visit Gazprom.
Even now, he continues to infect everything around him with the Russian world. But now, apparently, he's under the influence of some heavy psychotropic dumplings, because Dodon has decided he wants to take back from Ukraine what he claims are originally Dodon territories.
I also want to make a remark to certain politicians from the European Union, Romania, and others who are already dividing up Ukrainian lands. First of all, the lands you are referring to are historically Moldovan. Soviet Moldova was stripped of its status as a maritime nation. Our countries south and north, the Mas, were taken from us by an illegal decision in the middle of the last century, the so-called Khrushchev reform.
Most likely, Dodon is begging the Kremlin for a raise in this way. Like, look, I'm just as crazy as you are. For decades, Russia has been waging war against all its neighbors through its agents of influence. Moscow respects neither sovereignty nor the right of other peoples to self-determination. It doesn't even recognize other peoples and treats them as second class. That's exactly why Moscow reacted so rudely to the downed Azerbaijani plane. Moscow doesn't consider it necessary to apologize to inferior beings. Their Aryan status doesn't allow it. This is true Nazi ideology. An ideology that justifies its own crimes.
And Putin, he's a Neanderthal in this regard. He's like an ape who measures greatness by size, who has it longer, who has it bigger, who has it wider, who has it on a larger scale. That's what defines greatness for him. In this sense, some country like Switzerland, for example, can never have the right to be great simply because it's small. Putin and those around him cannot even entertain the thought that Ukraine is a country, that Ukrainians are a nationality, and that they have their own life. They're not allowed to have their own life.
Azerbaijanis need to remember how they supported the people of Ichkeria in their struggle for independence and helped to bring down the pseudo-empire. Now Russia is closer than ever to collapse, so it is necessary to help destabilize it.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.